Welcome to the Westside Barbell podcast, and today's topic is the repeated effort method, its training and exercise selection. With me today is my co-host, Burley. Burley, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
I'm going to start off this podcast with a definition from Zyatziorsky, who wrote The Science of Practice of Strength Training. Repeated effort method is lifting a non-maximal load to failure during the final repetitions. The muscle develops the maximum force possible in a fatigue state. And to add on to that, and I know context is very important here, we will either lift these exercises to failure or to near failure. We're chasing that stimulus up towards the top. But my first question to you is, why do we do it? Why is the repetition method crucial within our system? And what is the intent behind it?
Well, it's improved strength, as all of our methods do, but the primary focus on what this repeated effort method brings into the equation is hypertrophy work and work capacity work. So we're building muscle, improving the physical composition, and then we're also improving the ability for those muscles to both handle training density and training volume, set to set, workout to workout, week to week.
And when we implement the repeated effort method, where does that come into training? At what part?
Every training day. It's always the second part of our training day. It's our accessory work typically. There is times it can be used as a main exercise. That's a different context. We'll probably discuss that a different day. But in this situation, we're talking about the work that comes after the main work, the accessory exercise training.
And I think that's a good thing to bring up, that I would say pretty much interchangeably when we reference accessory work, that is in the realm of repeated effort method.
Yeah.
So accessory repeated effort method, they are one and the same. And that is referring to the exercises we're using to develop the strengths they're working on. So can we go into the 80-20 rule and what that means and where repeated effort method comes into it?
Yeah, that's a common thing that we say around Westside, the 80-20 rule. And what that indicates is that 20% of our training volume per day, and actually overall, is going to come from main exercise work, and then the other 80% of our training volume will come from the accessory exercise training.
And that's huge to think about, that 80% of your workouts are coming from, and we'll get into it, targeted specific exercises to develop the weakness, to develop strength, and that 20% is only on the compound movements. I think there's a common misunderstanding that we just use huge amounts of compound lifts and then that is it, when in fact the vast majority of all training sessions is critically dependent on those accessory exercises.
Yeah, certainly.
They help develop strength. They help develop physical composition. Why is that important?
Well, obviously, because you want an athlete to be in the best shape they can possibly be in. I mean, whether you're a super heavyweight power lifter or a conventional sports athlete, you want to obviously carry as much muscle mass and as little body fat as possible. That's going to allow you to recover better. That's going to allow you to feel better. It's going to allow you to perform better. And obviously that'll also lead to different health markers as far as blood work. An athlete that, carries more lean mass is just going to be in better condition.
And bringing up conditioning, the repeated effort method is huge for us to improve work capacity.
Yep. Just
like that pyramid is only tall of its base. Well, we're trying to build a broad base via the accessory work. How does it tie into that? How does it help improve recovery, help improve conditioning? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so as an athlete improves their work capacity, they're going to be able to tolerate more volume. They're going to be able to tolerate a higher level of training density, and they're going to be able to recover faster session to session. And not just session to session, they're going to be able to recover faster between workouts, between sets. So as work capacity improves, the overall quality of the training, follows.
And when you're getting into the repeated effort method, you're going to have thousands of exercises to select from. So at the start, there's going to be huge amounts of variance of what's working, what's not working. And it's to keep a list of the exercises that do work and carry over, and to ensure that you're chasing the stimulus the exercise provides rather than relying on a particular exercise. If you need to improve tricep strength, well, you want to try out every tricep exercise you can in a time frame to build that base to see what works, what doesn't carry over.
Yep.
And that's why it's hugely important that at the start, if you're beginning your strength training journey, is that you should try as many different exercises as you can. And eventually that pyramid starts getting narrower and narrower to where you have your grade A exercises.
Yeah.
So into its execution, when we have athletes or when you as a powerlifter are doing the repeated effort movements, are you going with low intent, high intent? What's the execution? What's the thought process behind when you're doing accessory exercises?
Well, so repeated effort training, even though it's the second thing that the part of the training of the day, it's no less important. So everything needs to be, each exercise needs to be performed with proper intent and execution. That means that we're pushing the training weights. We're not just going through the motions. We're not just selecting the training weights we use every week. Me personally, every week I try to go up 5 pounds if I can, more if possible. And then as far as the execution, we want a high level execution because when we're doing this repeated effort training, we're focusing oftentimes on specific individual muscles or muscle groups. So for that to be possible, the execution has to be on point. Otherwise, we may not be targeting those muscles or muscle groups to the greatest extent possible.
The selecting the training weights is a common question we get because I understand it's hard to know, well, how much weight should I do for a new exercise that I've done? But that's the beauty of the system is that you can keep the exercise in for a number of weeks. In for a number of weeks. And then once you establish your baseline, you know how to progress it every week. And then you rotate it out before accommodation sets in. But at the start, it can be pretty overwhelming because there's so many choices, but you got to pick somewhere, understand what's weak. And that's where max effort will tell you wherever you fail on a lift, or wherever you feel you struggle the most at is a telltale sign of okay, I got to find exercises that it's going to improve in there. And I like what you brought about the intent is that you should be treating each one of these as each rep should be maximal intent. You should be giving everything you can because it's giving you, a good process to go through. You're not going to get any bad habits of just trying to save yourself for those last 3 reps. Everything should be close to all out intent in every rep. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, certainly. When we're training, obviously, we're trying to train with the intensity is limited by the weight selection. So I'm not talking intensity in the terms of weight, but we're trying to train with the proper intensity as far as volition. We're really trying to have a high level of output.
And the definition calls for failure, but there is value in leaving 1 or 2 reps in the tank, especially if you know you're going to come to it next week. So you're always progressing. You said you try to get 5 pounds. But to me, if it's your last week with that exercise, there is some value to push it once you're falling within the rep ranges, which we'll get into in a second. You don't want to make it too heavy. It's like Goldilocks, got to be just right.
Yeah.
You don't want to lift too heavy, get nothing from it. You don't want to lift too light and have 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps that are super simple.
Certainly.
You have to push yourself so you understand what your boundaries are.
Yeah. And when we talk about leaving reps in the tank, say if I got a 3-rep or a 3-set or a 4-set exercise, the first 2 sets, the first 3 sets, we're going to leave a set of 1 to 2 in the tank. Then maybe on that final set, we'll push, as heavy as possible. Or oftentimes, like we would, Louis would advise, on that final set, even if it's 8 to 10, if you've got 12, if you've got 15, push as many reps as you can possibly do on that last set. So essentially, those sets oftentimes become, as many reps as possible.
Another question we get is using equipment. Should you use belts, wraps, shoes, straps while you're doing the accessory work?
Yeah, certainly. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. You have some folks that are against the use of lifting straps, in my opinion. If I can do a heavier barbell row, if I can do any sort of heavier back work, if I can do pull-ups with the use of lifting straps, I'm going to use them. Wrist straps make sense, if you're doing, close grip, repeated effort work, bench press, repeated effort work, you protect your wrist, alleviate the wear and tear. Belts make sense, exercises like barbell rows, rack pulls, anything like that. And then obviously proper shoes we always talk about. Flats are obviously the best, but if you're a guy that squats in your, the raised heel, if we're doing repeated effort work with the, squat focus grip being the raised heel. So just make sure that the equipment both allows you to train properly and allows you to train optimally.
And it's to give even more context to that. Once you're not using the equipment to mask a weakness, that is to where if you have a grip problem and you keep using straps, just say for deadlift, well, then you're never going to give a chance to carry over any extras or accessory exercise you're doing for grip. There's times and places when to use them, when not to use them. But if I'm working with some of the grapplers who are going to use their hands all day long, well, I got zero issue with them using straps because they're getting more out of the exercises rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and if you're an athlete that depends on straps often, if you notice, hey, I always have to use these lifting straps, that's going to be an indicator that your grip's probably weak and then maybe you should start adding some grip-focused training as well.
So if we get into the rest between sets, and we'll get into the schemes of sets and reps in a little bit, but can you take us through the difference in repeated effort method rests for max effort, dynamic effort, and repeated effort?
Yeah, so this was a slide featured in a previous podcast where we talked about rest between sets. Max effort's always going to be the longest rest between sets because we're trying to get the greatest recovery as far as ATP goes and as far as just general energy, general feel, so we can push that heaviest weight, highest intensity for the training day. Dynamic effort, repeated effort, that's where we start to really focus on bringing that density to a higher level. So you're looking at 45 seconds to a minute. That's for a properly trained athlete or an in-shape athlete. If you're a beginner, you might have to give yourself a little bit more time. In that case, we would advise that you want to take as long as necessary to be able to perform the next set to standard. Long as necessary being the operative phrase there. You don't want to take too much time, too little time, just the right amount of time to make sure that you can properly execute the exercise and meet the set and rep requirements.
In average, we're trying to complete workouts within 60 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to fit in your accessories and your main lifts, everything within that time parameters. It may go a little bit over, a little bit under, but you're right. When you're a beginner, you want to pay close attention to this. You don't want to train like a pro athlete off the bat because you'll burn out. Injury will occur because you're moving too fast. Yep. But as your capacity goes, work capacity goes up, you have to start pushing yourself and making those sessions more and more dense.
Yeah. So the improvement of work capacity is not just because of the training volume; it is also because of the training density. So when we really focus on tightening up those rest times, that's just a low-hanging fruit way of improving work capacity.
So if we're going through a max effort, dynamic effort day, we've executed the main movements, and then what would follow next for the repeated effort method is the primary accessory. And we have a slide here to go through this, and I'll hand it back over to you. But what is the purpose of the primary accessory movement as compared to the ones that follow on from that?
All right, so the primary accessory movement is always going to be a bit higher intensity. It's always going to be a multi-joint movement. We're oftentimes using this as a way to target a weakness. So, for instance, say if an athlete has an anterior lower body or even anterior trunk weakness, we'll introduce something like the front squat. If an athlete has weak triceps, we'll introduce something like a close grip bench press. Athlete with a weak back, we might go with a pen lay row. Athlete with, once again, weak tricep extension ability, upper back training, JM press. Then if we have an athlete with a weak posterior chain, we can go with something like the giant cambered bar good morning. You'll see that the reps and set schemes 4 by 3 to 5, 4 by 5 to 8, even a 5 by 5 in there. That's going to keep us within the realm of heavy effort training. It's submaximal, but it's mostly heavy effort training. We're trying to push the intensity to a degree. And the reason that we perform this movement first is because it's going to require a high level of energy. We already have some energy expended, obviously, after the main exercise. So the primary exercise is immediately after. We're also, this is the cool thing about these methods, right? It's kind of gradient. So even though hypertrophy work capacity is the focus of repeated effort, this allows us to, the primary accessory allows us to travel in towards somewhat close to max effort intensities, heavy effort intensities, which will give us a higher payoff in terms of improving absolute strength as well.
And this is probably one of the, I won't say the few places, but it's compound movement specific. It's a lot of this is done with a barbell compared to the isolation, which we'll get into the next few accessory exercises we get through. But I think this is another thing that people potentially misunderstand is that your first accessory exercise is there to improve strength. It's very important. Selecting that is crucial because it has to carry back over into what you're doing, eliminate that weakness.
Yeah.
And it should be hard, especially on max effort day. This has got to be hard because the intensity is high in terms of the weight being lifted.
Yeah. Like I said, it's pretty much it's submaximal to a degree, heavy effort at times, and then the beauty of it is that obviously we can affect absolute strength in a second way aside from max effort training.
And then the ability to, I would say, change between barbells, change stimuluses back to select exercises that transfer into the weakness. Mm-hmm. And having a rotation of barbells is huge for that.
Yeah.
Because the more barbells you have, they're pretty inexpensive compared to equipment, but a little change is a lot when it comes to stimulus.
And I'd also like to add with the primary exercise training is, a lot of folks that criticize our training will say that we are non-specific with our main exercises at times. So, they worry that they might lose competency in the competition lifts. The primary accessory exercise is where you can continue to build competency and improve the competition lifts. So say, for instance, if, the main exercise is a, 2-inch deficit deadlift, not very competition specific. I can follow up with some, sumo deads or conventional deads off the floor at the primary. If I have, if we're deep in the weeds on some squat variations on the main exercise, primary exercise offers an opportunity maybe to run a 5x3, competition squat exercise. So use that as a means to not only attack weaknesses, we use it to focus on technical execution aspects too. If an athlete has issues with, collapsing chest and squat, maybe some SSB squat in the primary accessory exercise. But aside from that, we can also use this primary accessory exercise selection to continue to build and improve the competition lifts.
If you are a lifter and you're absolutely smoked after max effort, you work all the way up and then you creeped out a 5-pound PR, but it was everything you had. If a fly landed on the bar, there's not a snowball's in hell's chance you're going to get it. Should you still consider doing a primary accessory movement, or if you're in excess fatigue, should you drop it?
It would be situation. It would be depend on the situation. I would still argue that there might be some value in going with that primary accessory exercise for the simple fact that you can obviously you're going to be at a higher level of fatigue, so the ability to recruit large to largest motor units is actually a little bit easier. So at that point, you might not have to go as heavy to have that large to largest motor unit recruitment effect to occur. You might not be able to push as heavy, but you can still push heavy enough to where you can still make some gains in absolute strength. Where I might say, cut the primary accessory exercise if, after that main, max effort set that you were smoked to a point to where you can barely walk, or for instance, say, this happens where you're not injured, but you might have had a muscle strain, something like that. Then at that point, yeah, maybe we would concede this primary accessory exercise, move straight into the secondary accessory exercises. Or, if somebody's strained a muscle to a certain point, it might be hypers, abs, and out the door.
So that's a good way to segue into the secondary accessory exercises. So to give everyone a logical progression, we've started our workout. We have, on max effort day, for example, we've worked up to 1 rep max. We have hopefully attained our PR. Then we've moved into our primary accessory work, which is lifting with lower sets and reps for about 3 to 4 sets. And once that is done, now it's into the more isolation-based secondary accessories. And if you can kind of discuss what we consider to select these.
Yeah, so a secondary accessory exercise can be a multi or a single joint movement. They're oftentimes more or less single joint movements. The intensity is going to be a little bit lowered, volume a little bit more increased. We're going to be focusing more on the hypertrophy and work capacity aspects of repeated effort training at this point. Oftentimes, it's going to be exercise. Well, for instance, it's going to be exercises like hammer curls, rolling dumbbell, dumbbell row backs, lat pull downs, even barbell rows. There's going to be some exercises that can both be, primary or accessory or secondary accessory exercises. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
To me, the secondary accessory exercise is where people go bananas, in that there's so much selection. They either add too many or not enough variation. And this is really where a lot of the work is getting done, because you can get very specific. Yeah. Especially you can isolate single joint over multi-joint. And again, it's all dependent on what weakness you have found to improve upon.
Yep.
But this is to where you work with a list if you're just beginning, try out new exercises, and then get rid of the ones that don't work. If you find ones that you're really, really good at, you probably shouldn't be doing them. Try find the ones that are hard for you, so you're actually lifting lighter weight and getting more from it. And the set and rest schemes we have on this slide here is 4 sets, 10 to 12. It could be 12 to 15, just so you have for the tricep extension. These are just rules of thumb. Sometimes we'll do 3 sets. Sometimes we'll do 4. It all depends, and we might give ranges of 10 to 12, 8 to 10, 6 to 8. The beauty of the system is you have freedom to experiment with different sets of reps, especially if hypertrophy is the case. Obviously, the reps are going to go up. If absolute strength development is the case, the reps will go down, but the intensity is going to go up with that.
Yep.
The one thing that I remember seeing a lot of you guys do, and Lou was huge on it, was doing potentially ultra high volume sets or potentially a drop set at the end.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of that?
That's to reach the point of failure. At that point, we're achieving, the true Zotski-Orski definition of what repeated effort training is. And there's also, like you said, with ultra high volume training, there's times where we'll do 3 to 4 sets of 50 to 100 in a banded press down. There was times that, if you remember the ankle weights, we used to do hamstring curl ankle weights for time and for 100 reps at a time, or as many reps as possible at a time. So when we're talking about set and rep schemes, there's a lot of liberty there. Really, what we want to do is we want to make sure that whatever exercise we're selecting, that we're programming it properly based on the athlete's needs. So if an athlete has weak triceps, we might go 3 to 4 sets, 8 to 10 on the rollbacks to push the intensity a little bit more. If an athlete has issues with work capacity with the triceps, we might kick the the accessory volume up a little bit. All depends on the athlete, the situation.
And maybe dig in a little bit deeper on the selection of exercises, like trying to address weaknesses, keep imbalances. Yeah. But do you have a checklist or something that you run through for yourself when you're training or when you're working with your athletes? What are you looking for selection?
It's just a thought process and really recommendations. So I think one of the biggest things that folks make mistakes with when they're building their accessory exercise training is that they get too focused on weak point training. What we want to do is we don't want to get so focused on one weakness that we essentially are creating another weakness just for lack of training. So the first thing I tell all athletes to do is we want to have a base battery of accessory exercises that covers the bases. So if we're talking upper body, we're looking at some back exercise, some tricep exercise, bicep and shoulder. Lower, we got to have some hamstring, got to have some quad, we got to have some calf training, obviously trunk training. So you don't want to get so far focused. If you're have weak triceps, all we would recommend is maybe adding a set or two more to your tricep work, or maybe adding one more tricep exercise in per session, or even just per week. You don't got to go hog wild on focusing on weak points. Other than that, I want to talk about rotations real quick. We can keep rotations in the mix for up to 3 weeks before we change, to avoid accommodation. Generally, that's a good way for beginners to go about both their primary and secondary accessory exercises, for the simple fact that they build competency over that time. If you're a bit more experienced athlete, or how we did at the gym, is typically every week we're going to run a different accessory exercise selection. Some exercises might remain in the mix, but the mix will change up to some degree.
It's a very good point you brought up about not getting 100% focused on the weakness, because then it becomes another weakness because you're leaving everything else. But
yep.
I think I can address the aspect of we're known for pushing hamstring strength because they're underutilized, undertrained, but it doesn't mean we avoid training quads.
Yeah.
Like to where we will ensure we maintain the strength we have in them, improve where necessary, but we don't just let them detrain and don't specifically avoid them just to focus on hamstring.
Yeah. That's the craziest thing I hear is when folks talk about we don't train our quads at Westside. First of all, you wouldn't have the squats we've had at the gym if you didn't train your quads. Secondly, Louis had a machine called the Hip Quad Developer. And thirdly, I'll say this: if you were at Westside Barbell as an athlete and you had to have Louis tell you to train your quads, I don't know what the fuck you're doing there. You should have known to train your quads anyways. Hell, we have a hack squat machine. So there's many instances where we train the quads. For instance, the SSB, that's an anterior focused quad dominant squat variation. So it's close stance box squatting. So there's many ways that we train the quads. So if you hear somebody say that we don't train quads at Westside, you'd really have to question what they know about Westside and the conjugate method.
And it's the same with the abductors, adductors. If you're not
heavily
training
focused on that.
Yeah, you have to. It's what makes up the leg. But we're not avoiding it. And I think it could, for some, it can be easily misunderstood that if we're not hugely vocal about it, was because there is such a prevalence of lack of hamstring strength that we're trying to focus on that. So that's where we're going to shine the brightest light on.
Yeah, Louis was just focused on the fact that most athletes come in the gym with a quad dominant squat or just a quad dominant, lower body, and they just need to focus on the hamstring strength.
So we have gone through from main effort to primary accessory to secondary accessories. We went through the sets and rep schemes of each, why we're doing the accessory exercise aspects following a main movement. Another thing to bring up and move into this next segment is replacing the dynamic effort method with the repeated effort method and why we would do that.
Yeah. So when we get to this point in training, there is times where speed training starts to not pay as great a dividend as it did previously. That's for both beginners or experienced athletes. And then also we can use repeated effort training as a means to introduce a second training day to a beginner athlete that might not have the training ability or exercise competency to properly execute dynamic effort within safe parameters.
And if you're starting training, is this good to put in to build up your tolerance to it?
Yeah. So for beginners, I think that I hate to say that, issue some sort of a mandate about how to run conjugate because, I trust any coach to, match the training based on the athlete they're working with. But for most beginners, I think introducing repeated effort training as that second day instead of speed work is probably a better way to both build competency in exercises and just build that strength, and that work capacity to ensure that once an athlete moves on to true dynamic effort training, that they have the strength, the work capacity, and the ability to maintain, safe execution throughout.
If you think of it like school, you start elementary, you start gaining literacy skills, how to read, how to write.
Yeah.
Well, if you think of this as physical literacy, if you're new to this, getting a base and accessory exercise is huge to build up your literacy of how your body works, how to handle weights, how to be good in the gym. And again, but broadening that base. Once you have that, then it's easier and more efficient to step up to the next process in it.
Yeah, and then the thing with when you have a beginner trying dynamic effort, you're going to get a lot of different issues. You might have issues with set to set recovery. They can't recover within the right time frame. They can't maintain the proper speed. They're not maintain the average of 0.8 meters per second. So the training becomes inefficient to where it makes more sense just to do repeated effort, get that accrued volume. And it's really a graded exposure, right? We're going to just try to add a little bit more weight each week when we're doing repeated effort work. And then as an athlete is trying to get to the point where they can execute proper dynamic effort work, we can use repeated effort training and just advise that athlete to start, adding a compensatory acceleration aspect to the repeated effort training to get them used to moving in a dynamic effort fashion.
Can you discuss this slide, the 3-week wave approach to this?
Yeah, so this shows the basic dynamic effort training wave. So you'll see 12 by 2. Everybody's familiar with this. The next slide would show how we're going to change this to go to repeated effort training. So you start to see that there's going to be bar weight only. We're going to take the accommodating resistance out of the equation. So we're going to lower the training percentages slightly. Here, it's, I think, 10%. We start first weeks are going to be 5 by 5. Bench press is 8 by 8, 6 by 6, 5 by 5. I put that in there just to show people ask a lot of times about the 8 by 8, the 6 by 6 training. We do it, not often. It's for more experienced athletes, but I just wanted to show that's how we go about it. In my opinion, if I'm working with a beginner, that bench press work's also going to be 5 by 5. So like I said, a lot of volume here. The bar weight's reduced to ensure that each set and rep is going to be performed properly. And then also over the course of the 3 weeks that the athletes will be able to recover properly. But yeah, here the focus is, submaximal training weight. We're focused on driving volume, building competency in these movements. And then once the athlete's building competency in these movements, then we can start, like I said, to add a compensatory acceleration aspect to this repeated effort training. And then once they show competency in that, we can move them on to true dynamic effort training.
And are you still focused on trying to lift these as fast as possible, or is the goal to get used to the exercises and get used to the stimulus?
Well, get used to it first. Like if you're working with beginners, especially, or somebody that's new to the conjugate method, right? Not everybody's used to moving submaximal weights at maximal velocity. So if you're new to the methods or you're a beginner athlete, we're going to focus on this. Initially, we'll be just focused on moving the weight in a correct fashion. We're not really so much worried about velocity in the repeated effort training. As the athletes build competency, we might start adding that compensatory acceleration advisement to the repeated effort training with the goal of using that as a bridge to move the athlete on to the true dynamic effort training.
And to give an example of the use of specialty bars and accommodating resistance, can we go through this slide?
Yeah, so this just shows how we could potentially rotate to have just a standard barbell, a barbell with accommodating resistance, and then make sure we're bringing all different sorts of barbells into the mix. So the first wave we're going with the comp bar, comp stance, comp grip with no accommodating resistance. Moving into the second wave, we're going to start adding SSB. We're adding opposite stance with bands. We're close grip with bands. So we're just changing training effects to target different aspects of lift, different muscle groups, and to bring about different training adaptations and outcomes. Some
of the benefits of repeated effort training, and this is not dynamic effort. We're going through this as repeated effort episode. Is like, what are the benefits of it?
Of rotating the specialty bars?
of the benefits of repeated effort training and like going through being able to
I got you.
rotate.
Yeah. So really the benefit of repeated effort training, like we were discussing with beginners especially, has no velocity requirement. So an athlete can really just focus on executing the movements properly. It's less fatiguing because, we want to push density, but we're not so much focused on density. We're just focused on proper execution, accruing this volume. And then obviously it's going to increase hypertrophy work capacity because not only are we going to be driving volume in our accessory work as typical, this repeated effort wave is also going to be driving volume work within your main exercise. And that's going to be twice per week, both upper and lower.
And if we move on to the frequency,
yeah,
I know it's usually every 3 or 4 waves, but can you get into this a little bit more specific?
Yeah, so like we said, with beginners, this would be every week would be repeated effort until we would judge the beginner as competent enough to move into pure dynamic effort training. This here would represent how an athlete that's experienced could add repeated effort training into their main exercise work. So we'd run pretty much 2 waves with dynamic effort, and then go with a wave of repeated effort just continue that pattern. And what that does, in my opinion, is it helps to, when we bring in that repeated effort work, it makes it more effective because it's new, right? The body adapts to a new stimulus. And then when we kick back that into the dynamic effort work, I think that athletes respond to that better as well. Also, I like repeated effort work because we take out accommodating resistance, specifically the bands. And, bands are oftentimes fatiguing, can, have wear and tear on the joints, different aspects of that. So it just gives an athlete 3 weeks of valuable volume and a little bit of rest and recovery.
And it shows the adaptability of the conjugate method.
Yeah.
You don't have to get stuck in any groove. It's open to interpretation once you know the boundaries of that interpretation.
Yep.
But I like what you brought up. It is great to change up the stimuluses when everyone is so used to dynamic effort.
Yeah.
To the accommodating resistance, then you just put in a repeated effort meta wave and it changes it up, kind of resets them back into, when they go back into dynamic effort, like, okay, this is what this feels like, rather than just going through a more, I won't say linear, but just when you know all the answers, you change the questions, kind of a thing.
Yeah, 100%. And then, if you think in terms of adaptation, at some point, the return on investment becomes less and less the more a specific training method is introduced. So, repeated effort training oftentimes, even for, an advanced level athlete, you can only become so fast, right? So Jason Coker comes to mind. He prefers repeated effort training over speed training because he feels like he gets more out of it than his speed training. So it all comes down to individual response and the adaptations individuals see from workouts and methods, and really just leveraging that in your program construction to make sure that you can, improve as rapidly and as efficiently as possible.
So when we move into troubleshooting the repeated effort method, how do you adjust repeated effort method to issues with fatigue or time constraints?
It's real simple. So if we're dealing with issues with fatigue, we're going to eliminate the most fatiguing aspect of the repeated effort training, which will oftentimes be the primary accessory exercise. We also might work with a little bit of higher rep ranges to alleviate some of that exercise intensity. If we're dealing with a time constraint, we're going to eliminate the least the least needed exercise per se. So, for instance, if we're finishing the day with banded face pulls, or even sled pulls, not to say that they're not valuable exercises, but if we have to get out of the door, those might be the exercise that we cut off. So. With an issue with fatigue, we're going to, regulate the intensity of the exercise or modify the primary exercise and just eliminate it. And then with time constraints, we're just going to get rid of the exercises that we essentially need the least.
And if you're going to, just say you train by yourself and you don't have methods of external feedback, what are some of the signs to where fatigue is stepping in? How do you know to be honest with yourself? Like, when is it the time to adjust training weights, etc.?
Yeah, so the first thing is if you find yourself after the main exercise is tired to where you have to really force yourself to work through your accessory exercise training, that would be an indicator that, well, it could be an indicator that you're out of shape, but if you're actually in shape and you typically have a good training, that could be indicative of a recovery issue. Another way to monitor this is your training weights lowering by the week. So if I'm typically, say, pressing 120-pound dumbbells on my incline dumbbell press, and, last week I only was able to get 105s. This week the 95s are feeling heavy. That's an indicator that we might have some issues going on. Trouble sleeping, if you find yourself, short naps throughout the night, or if you, wake up every few hours, if you have trouble falling asleep. We're also looking at elevated heart rate. And then overuse injuries. So if you start to have aches and pains in the elbows and the wrists, achy neck, achy back, all that, just the basic types of wear and tear. could be indicative of an overuse injury. We're going to start to cut back the repeated effort training volume a little bit to allow recovery to take place. Create gaps to allow recovery to take place, I should say.
And to use my favorite word, context, to this is when you're beginning this, if you're starting out of this, you're going to be tired. It's going to take you a few weeks to adapt to the training. So that's something you have to push through. But if you are well established within this, everything you just said are feedback signs of to something has to change. You're going to have to eliminate something or adjust something on that.
Yep.
Another thing I wanted to bring up, like from my preference, when I have athletes, when we're going through potentially new accessory exercises, instead of keeping the 3-week wave, I'll do a 4-week wave, especially for max effort. And we'll use that first week as a feedback mechanism of these are all new exercises potentially you've never done before. So for us to establish numbers, it's huge. One, you're getting introduced to the exercise, how it works, the movements, etc. You're handling weights, and then we'll use that 1 week to flesh out the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So then we have some sort of mechanism to go like, okay, I did this. I know what it feels like. I definitely went too light, went too heavy. And that eliminates the inaccuracies of trying to achieve the sets and reps within the zones we're trying to get.
And that's actually especially useful for athletes that are going to have varying levels of fatigue because they have a lot of other things going on outside of the gym other than just barbell training.
I think that covers this topic. Burley, want to thank you. Want to thank everyone for tuning in, listening, and watching. Make sure to check out the new exercise playlist on our YouTube channel. It's going to go through, right now we've got 60 accessory exercises on there with some compound lifts too, but make sure to check that out. And if you want to learn more about how the conjugate method works, please check out our courses over on our website, westside-barbell.com. Until the next time, see ya.